infrastructure and facilities, and they are also overburdened. Sometimes you also find cases where there are the issues of technicalities unnecessary. Some persons say that then lead to delays.
In fact, adding to this, lawyers have been accused of devising means to delay matters in court, especially when they realize it's not going in their favor.
Well, there have been attempts at also reforming the judicial process. We have seen, for instance, with regard to prosecution of criminal matters through the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, by which unnecessary adjournments have been largely curtailed. But still, there are the issues relating to how lawyers play their role in the dispensation of justice. From what we saw last week, for instance, with the Supreme Court coming down hard some very senior members of the bar and indeed imposing fines on them on account of what was termed frivolous applications to the highest court in the land.
And you know, Kingsley, Marcus Tullius Cicero once said that justice is the set and constant purpose which every man is due. But can this be a reflection of Nigeria in years to come? How can the common man access justice without undue adjournments and consequent excess legal fees? What is the implication of this practice? What policies should be employed to end this charade? These and more we shall be discussing on Good Morning Nigeria today, coming to you live on the network service of the NTA. I am Jumbo Yusuf.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments. These include newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, here is Musbah Wahab with the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Musbah.
So very good morning, Kingsley. And Jumai, here is the news. The federal government has approved the issuance of sovereign guarantee for a loan facility amounting to 85% of $2.57 billion engineering procurement and construction contract for the Ajaokuta Kaduna Kano Gas Pipeline Project. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, announced this while briefing newsmen after the Federal Executive Council meeting, which also made other resolutions critical to the nation's economy.
Of this present administration, and it is very strategic to national development. It has a lot of positive impact that we anticipate will be met.
The House of Representatives has approved a budget of more than 346.3 billion naira for Niger Delta Development Commission (NDDC) for 2019 financial year to end on May 31st, 2020. 306.50 billion naira of that amount is for development projects in the Niger Delta region.
Development projects for the service of the Niger Delta Development Commission (NDDC), and it's for the financial year ending on the 31st of May 2020.
Leadership of the Senate has visited the isolation center in Gwagwalada, Federal Capital Territory, for inspection, during which President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, described the center as not ready to receive patients. Senator Lawan, who had met with the Minister of Health on Tuesday on the need to urgently establish isolation centers across the state, explained that the isolation center in Gwagwalada is not completed, as the FCT neighboring states have no structure to call isolation center. He promised to ensure that the Ministry of Finance will release funds immediately for the completion of the center.
That was supposed to be released to this place for fixing of everything here. NCDC, not a couple has been released. We're going to get to, of course, the Minister of Finance and all the other authorities who have anything to do with this.
We believe we're doing our best, and it's out of the meager resources that we have come this far.
Away from the National Assembly, President Muhammad Buhari has commended Aliko Dangote Foundation for donating the sum of 200 million naira to assist in combating the influx of COVID-19 into the country. A statement signed by the Special Advisor to Media and Publicity to the President, Femi Adesina, shows that the President recalls the organization had in the past donated 1 billion naira to tackle Ebola virus disease in Africa. He reiterated his earlier charge that Nigerians should take the necessary hygiene precautions rather than panic about the COVID-19 after discovery of the index case in the country last week. The President says governments at various levels are poised to ensure that the country and our people remain safe from the virus, which is spreading rapidly in many parts of the world. Health, wealth, and at this age of increasing pollution with global warming, people getting vulnerable to disease, top priority is expected to be given to healthy living. The recent commitment is coming from the collaboration between Nigeria's federal government and the World Health Organization (WHO) as the Ministry of Health launched Nigeria Health Workforce Country Profile 2018.
Nigeria's response to the World Health Organization's call to all nations of the world to strive towards attainment of universal health coverage and sustainable development goals through implementation of the global strategy on human resources for health.
We also look forward to ensuring that the government will ensure routine utilization of health workforce registry that will inform budgets, policies, plans at all levels, whether national, states, or local government level.
Now, Dr. Folashade Omolara Yemieso has formally assumed duty as substantive head of the Civil Service of the Federation. The new head of service was sworn in by President Muhammadu Buhari after confirmation of appointment last Friday.
I'd like to assure him that by the grace of God, I will work to ensure that his programs, his projects come to fruition and that the service delivery is improved tremendously.
Now, a Federal Capital Territory High Court in Ajabi, Abuja, has granted order of interim injunction stopping Adams Oshiomhole from parading himself as the national chairman of All Progressives Congress, APC. Ruling on the application brought before the court by Mustafa Salihu and 5 others, Justice Danladi Senchi granted the order on the ground that the plaintiffs have been able to show that Adams Oshiomhole was suspended by his ward, Esako West Ward 10 in Edo State. Justice Senchi adds that political parties must be bound by their constitution, and having been suspended by his ward, Adams Oshiomhole is restrained from functioning as the national chairman of a party pending the hearing and determination of the substantive suit.
What it means is that from this very moment, the first defendant, Mr. Adams Oshiomhole, ceases to be the chairman of APC. That's what it means. At least it's an interlocutory injunction.
Hearing on the matter has been fixed for the 7th and 8th of April 2020. The Nigeria Police has commenced the review of its strategies and the deployment of some of its most sophisticated arsenals to confront bandits terrorizing remote communities in Kaduna State. Inspector General of Police Mohammed Adamu announced these at a meeting with top hierarchy of the Kaduna State Police Command.
From other commands, we gather resources, we gather equipment, and then we brought them to Kaduna in order to assist the police officers in Kaduna, so as to work with the strategic officers that are already in Kaduna to deal with the banditry.
And that's the news highlight for now. After the break, a very learned Kingsley and an educated Jumai will be back to discuss lawyers and dispensation of justice. We have guests around.
Why you want to carry wahala for your head? Don't be only you get matter for your mind. No. Forget your worries, don't on the door yourself. My brother, free your mind. Enjoyment, don't be crying. Trust the lead to live your life and be free.
Free your mind with Airtel Smart Talk and enjoy calls to all networks at a flat rate of 11 kobo per second. 7 naira fee on the first call of the day applies. Dial *315# to join.
Trust the lead to live your life, free your mind.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down.
Do you have a job where you're going to? No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Aliko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. You know, I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad or even end up in prison.
My name is Giato Adeza Adams, the General Manager, Corporate and Strategic Communications, Nigerian Port Authority. As regards the land borders closure, available statistical data from APMT, which is one of our terminal operators that is involved in container handling terminal, has recorded an increase of 200 TEUs of cargoes into their terminal as a result of cargo diversion from the vessels originally meant for our neighboring countries. That shows you that the terminal operators is going to have an increase in revenue, which is accrued to the terminal, and at the same time, Nigerian Port Authority will equally benefit from the revenue increase. So that is the benefit we have derived from the border closure.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are skipping our business package and going straight now to a review of the papers we have this morning.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Oteobi, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Jume. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, good to see you. All right, so I begin with the Punch newspaper. Punch, above the nameplate, says electronic payments hit 10.89 trillion in January. That's on page 27. And below that, Buhari, Jonathan, Atiku, and others eulogize Obasanjo at 83. And U.S. places 2.5 billion naira bounty on Boko Haram leader Shekau. Sanusi faces fresh probe, and petitioners demand Emir's deposition. That's on page 8. Now, 2 earpieces beside the nameplate. Auditor General, ICPC to probe revenue leakage in FRS and others. Coronavirus, federal government to review budget as oil price plunges. Late story, it's on politics. Governors plan NEC meeting to replace Oshomole as court suspends APC chair. With 3 riders, court orders police and DSS to block ex-governor from accessing office. Oshomole NWC, that is the National Working Committee, appoints Ajimobi and others party officers. Suspended chair about to create chaos. That's according to the vice chairman of the party, Northeast. Herdsmen killed 4 in fresh attack on Benue community. Excuse me. And you can see the photographs there on the front page of the paper. Herdsmen killed 4 in fresh attack on Benue community. And bandits kidnapped pastor and 3 women in Niger. Alleged blasphemous parents arrested as protest rocks Kano. That's page 9. Troops at Boko Haram battle in Damboa and Dapchi comes under attack. Details inside the paper. Senators kick as Adeyemi condemns democracy and hails military rule. That is Senator Smart Adeyemi hailing military rule. Details on page 10. Katsina police go after 9 men for allegedly raping 10-year-old girl. And coronavirus, WHO tracing 65 Italian co-passengers. It's page 7.
And coming now to the Daily Sun newspaper, just beside the masthead, COVID-19, Nigeria not prepared to tackle outbreak. That's coming from the Senate President Ahmed Lawan, with riders, ministers, staff, orders screened at Presidential Villa. 4 Chinese quarantined in Abuja. All you need to know about the disease, and federal government may review 2020 budget. That's coming from the minister. Just below the masthead, Boko Haram hits Dapchi as 5 feared killed in another attack. You find that story on page 4 and 5. Knox, kudos as court sacks APC's Oshomole. With riders, we will obey court order. That's coming from the party scribe. It will provide atmosphere for peace. Edo APC. He can't be removed through back door, says Eroe, Delta chair. And the picture story there, you can see police keeping watch at the National Secretariat of the All Progressives Congress APC following the suspension of Adams Oshomole as national chairman of the party by Abuja High Court yesterday. At the bottom plate of the Daily Sun newspaper, National Assembly in 2 billion naira insurance mess, with rider, vehicles, buildings, staff lose cover. New electoral bill to give ballot box snatchers 15 years jail term. You find that on page 9. Kano Assembly begins fresh probe of Emir Sanusi. With rider, scores protest alleged blasphemy against Prophet Muhammad. You find that story on page 41. Buhari removes Peter Side as Nemasa boss. That story is on page 37. Bio.
Well, nearly all the papers are leading with the story talking about the decision of the Jabi Federal High Court in Abuja that presided over by Justice Danlami Senchi, ordering that Comrade Adam Oshomole should step down as the chairman of the All Progressive Congress. This is pending the dissemination of a substantive suit that has been brought by 7 persons, led by the national, the chairman of the Northeast of the All Progressive Congress, Comrade Mustafa Salihu. They asked the court for an order of interlocutory injunction restraining Comrade Adam Oshomole from parading himself as the functioning chair, and also from functioning as chairman of the party. Meanwhile, the All Progressive Congress says that they, being a law-abiding party, will abide by the instructions of the court. The All Progressive Congress, the Inspector General of Police, and the Department of State Services are the respondents in this case. Meanwhile, Comrade Adam Oshomole says he remains the chairman of the All Progressive Congress. His chief press secretary, Mr. Simon Egbegulem, says that because the APC lawyer has already filed a stay of execution and they have already appealed the High Court ruling directive of the Jabi FCT High Court. The Nigerian Army has expressed serious concern about what is described as betrayal, especially by groups that is described as 8 groups. It says the 8 groups are disguising their activity under the guise that they are providing humanitarian services, but they are actually providing support and logistics for the insurgents. This information was provided by defense spokesman Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, and he declared that the army, the action of the aid groups under the guise of providing logistics is undermining the fight against insurgency, and therefore the army will take that very seriously. Nwachukwu says that the military will not allow recklessness in the guise of humanitarian aid. Meanwhile, the humanitarian aid themselves, the Humanitarian Watch, says that the military and the civilian authority in the Northeast are making the activities to provide succor for 1.8 million internally displaced persons, as well as over 7 million persons requiring some support. They are becoming an obstacle from their initiatives. The military says that all legitimate groups who are providing legitimate programs will be given the due support, but those who are providing succor for the insurgents will not be tolerated.
Bayo, I just, because you appear to have finished with the APC story, the leadership of the APC. I think there's a point that needs to be clarified. Because you see the way the stories are presented. Let's take the punch again. It says, Governor's plan NEC meeting to replace Oshiomhole as court suspends APC chair. The court did not suspend APC chair. The court only affirmed the suspension of the APC chair at its ward level. And again, of course, it's an interlocutory injunction that has been granted. It's not the court that suspended him. The court affirmed the suspension that took place through the hierarchy of the party itself. And they say, okay, fine, that is being challenged. It's now fine. Until the matter is resolved, you stand suspended as directed by your ward, which is right there in the Sako local government in Edo State. So I think that point needs to be clarified. Now, the other point is that once you have a decision of a court like this, as I said, a decision which is a ruling, by the way, not the final judgment, if filing a notice of appeal doesn't amount to a stay of execution of that, there has to be a proper vacation of the order, in this case by a higher court, which would be the Court of Appeal. So I think that point needs to be clarified, so that it's not the court that is suspending him, but the court is, once again, as I said, affirming the suspension as indicated by the ward level. There are all kinds of legal arguments, of course, you will get to hear going forward.
Well, it's a good clarification. The other area of interest is that Nasarawa State says that henceforth it will take about 30,000 Almajiris in Nasarawa State, especially those who are under the age of 10, and repatriate them to their states of origin. Nasarawa State has a total of about 63,356 Almajiris. The state government banned Almajiri and street begging in Nasarawa. It has consequently says that 40,000 of those who are indigenous of Nasarawa State will be enrolled in school system that borders in the conventional school, Islamic school, and Tanzawa school system. And anybody who resists this will be dealt with in accordance with the law. But meanwhile, those who are under the age of 10 and are from other states will be taken back to their states. Those who are above the age of 10 will be joined in the registration that the Nasarawa State government is providing in the schools to take care of them.
Fine, that's a welcome development. Again, I mean, we've discussed the Almajiri issue on Good Morning Nigeria, and there were a number of proposals. But managing the data, it's going to be a very significant step. And unless and until the states begin to take their own measures, we are unlikely to get on top of this challenge.
Exactly. And, you know the story, COVID-19, Nigeria not prepared to tackle outbreak. Well, Senate President.
Yes, that was the reaction of the Senate President.
Yes.
Yesterday, there was concern expressed by members of the National Assembly, both the House of Rep and the Senate, about the fact that centers that are meant to take care of isolating persons who may unfortunately be victims of coronavirus are not ready. Okay. In fact, on the program yesterday, we were thinking that they were confusing the isolation centers with the laboratories. We tried to make clarification. But the Senate President visited the center that is in Abuja at Gwagwalada, and he was shocked to find out that nothing or very little is available. And it is the Center for Disease Control that had to source funds on their own to make makeshift facilities available in anticipation of the emergency. And that is why the Senate President regrettably said that apparently we are not ready for the emergency that is facing the world. But luckily for us, if we are to go by the latest now, so far there has not been any other cases. As at the last count, about 7 Chinese citizens have been, who had arrived in the country have been tested, and all of them have tested negative. You reported earlier on 3 others that have now been quarantined. Yes. They are supposed to go undergo test. Being quarantined or isolated does not mean that they have the virus. It is after a test has been conducted that it will be confirmed. So far, in Nigeria, there's still only 1 case, and the case is the one that was imported from Milan, and he's said to be improving. Senegal has already registered 2 other cases, bringing the total to 4. Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, and I think 1 other North African country are also 4 countries in North Africa that have that. In sub-Saharan Africa, so far it is only Senegal and Nigeria that have instances of coronavirus.
Okay, well, Bayo, thanks. Just to come back to the National Assembly and coronavirus issue in Nigeria. You know, yesterday the reports in the papers indicated that the House of Representatives was voting to proceed on a 2-week recess, you know, to enable it, take the Assembly management to take care of setting up facilities for screening and fumigation and so on and so forth. Well, the spokesman of the House of Reps, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, came out yesterday, after the program, by the way, to clarify that no date had been fixed yet for the House of Reps, you know, to proceed on recess, that it was just a motion on the floor. But fine, the explanation is good, but contrast that with what the Senate did yesterday. The Senate President Ahmad Lawan led some of his colleagues to undertake a tour of the isolation facility that is supposed to be at the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital at Gwagwalada. The Senate has never mentioned that they were proceeding on recess. I mean, this is a time of global emergency, and all hands ordinarily should be on deck. Part of what the Senate President indicated yesterday was that, look, the funds that ordinarily should be released to facilitate the setting up of emergency response procedures and purchase of gadgets and so on and so forth, including protective gear, you know, for healthcare workers, that those funds apparently have not been released. And he said he was going to follow up. And I think that's a show of leadership, and it should be commended. Yes. Rather than, you know, rather than the House of Reps members sitting in the comfort of their chambers and announcing that they were going to proceed. They were going to proceed on recess for 2 weeks, you know, to enable them. I mean, it was just, it did it. I'm sure you heard all kinds of reactions yesterday when it was
a motion by the minority leader.
I watched it live
in the House of Representatives.
Plenary was going
he even cited an instance that, look, the only case we have is in Ota, Ewikoro area, and the member representing that constituency is already here, apparently implying that they are not safe.
Yes, because I remember one of the members saying that it's no respecter of persons. Coronavirus doesn't know who is a legislator or not. We're coming now to the editorial that is from the Nigerian Pilot, and it's talking about what we're just discussing now. You know, they said, reps, it is unacceptable. It is a very disingenuous way for federal lawmakers to abdicate their responsibility when the nation needs them most. This action of Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila-led House underscores the seriousness these lawmakers attach to national issues.
Yes. Yes, the editorial is saying that we are not saying that the lives of lawmakers are not important. We say no. But however, they add that the life of every Nigerian is of equal importance. And when there is an emergency, they as leaders, particularly at the legislature, they should be the forefront of finding solutions, not abdicating their responsibility and proposing to go on recess. After all, they just returned from end-of-year recess.
Mm-hmm. And they're the direct representative of the people. All around the world, I see, you know, Senate reps, you know, trying to find solutions to this coronavirus. Well, we'll get to see what happens now.
Part of Bayo, I mean, we've also touched on this in the past. It just needs to be reiterated that when you have a fragile health care system, emergencies of this nature usually will be a wake-up call. Apart from Lagos State government, for instance, the Federal Ministry of Health, the Federal Minister is Minister of State, and the DG of the Center for Disease Control. What is it that we are seeing from other states? What isolation centers are other states, setting up just in case there's an outbreak in any of such states? I think it's very important. It is not just the federal government alone. Yes, the federal government will provide a lead, because this is a national issue. But the states also have to take responsibility. Happily, the Plateau State government did its own when they took in some of those Chinese nationals for testing, and the test turned out to be negative. And that's to be commented about. Elsewhere around the country, what do we know as to what is happening? And that's to say, what is the role of the subnational governments in all of this?
Well, in fairness to most state governments, many have set up committees, many have activated the emergency requirement by asking the Commissioner of Health to lead the initiative, link up with the federal government and the Nigeria Center for Disease Control to put emergency isolation centers online, so that in the event we have any within the state, they will be able to tackle it.
What beats me is, Bayo, is why are we always having this fire brigade approach? After Ebola, Lassa fever, are we not supposed to have these centers already established?
After Ebola, we had centers. Ebola took us by surprise, and we surprised Ebola by being able to cope. However, instead of sustaining, we have a culture, a poor maintenance culture, and sustaining some of these emergency things. The attitude was that Ebola has come, we have overcome Ebola, and then we will stay relaxed. There should have been all these centers available. Look at it. On your way to the airport, there is a cancer center that was proposed as far back as 2012, 2013. It is still there. A whole big place.
Which can be used and put to use.
And we are crying day in, day out. And you will recall, before that place was built, there was a huge fundraising ceremony by state government, federal government, and public-spirited persons contributed money. What has become of that?
Okay, thank you so much, Bayo. The issue now is we need to sit up. Thank you, Bayo.
Thank you, too.
We'll take a break right now. When we return, our conversation begins. Don't go away.
We'll be able to unite, irrespective of tribe, religion, and culture. So we keep preaching on love. That is the only binding force. Let us love ourselves, irrespective of where the person comes from.
You are about to witness the commencement of the most stimulating and compelling contest on television. This contest is only for the strong, the intelligent, and the talented. Get ready for the Unity Challenge reality TV show. Coming soon.
We have 30,364 individual, 6,437 household.
Boko Haram ya koro mu daga garinmu wanda ake cewa Doron Baga.
The government has done a lot of things. Some corporate bodies have also done a lot of things, but there's still a lot to be done.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria and we are broadcasting live in Abuja. To begin our discussion on lawyers and dispensation of justice, let's have this background report by Abdusalam Jubril.
As the popular saying goes, the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. However, the frivolities of lawyers could seem a far cry from this assertion, with many Nigerians seeking redress in courts. This is so because a major factor inhibiting the rule of law and proper administration of justice in Nigeria in recent times is the rise in the abuse of court process by lawyers and their clients. In some cases, unscrupulous judges act in connivance with these lawyers, ignoring the fact that their power comes with the responsibility to be fair to all. Also, because laws are sometimes very complex, some lawyers capitalize on the limits of the rule of law to abuse the court process, thus undermining the capability of the judiciary to dispense justice in the most efficient and effective manner. While unscrupulous politicians, the rich, and corporate criminals are the usual suspects sponsoring this charade called lawsuits, lawyers literally smile to the banks and the media have a field day reporting courtroom drama and theatrical behavior of various counsels. Now, how will justice serve as the last hope of the common man if lawyers continue to engage in such frivolities and not give the right information to the bench to decide cases justly? With the recent fine on 2 senior lawyers by the Supreme Court over the application for a review of its judgment on the Bayelsa governorship election, will this serve as deterrent to other lawyers in the habit of filing such applications? Today on Good Morning Nigeria, we shall examine lawyers and dispensation of justice.
All right, now joining us from our Kaduna Network Center to discuss this issue, would like to welcome learned senior advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman. Yunus Ustaz Usman, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, and here with us in our Abuja studios, we would like to welcome the former General Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mazi Afam Osigwe. Mazi Afam, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And also here with us in the studios is Frank Tietie. Frank Tietie is a human rights lawyer and executive director, Citizens Advocacy for Social and Economic Rights. Frank,
my
pleasure to have you with us on the program. I don't know if the audio in Kaduna is all right now. Okay, so let's go over to the learned senior advocate, Yunus Ustaz Usman. Senior advocate, I'm sure you listened to that background report by our correspondent. There are a number of issues that have been raised in there, but our focus essentially is on lawyers and the dispensation of justice. So looking at the value chain of justice delivery in the country and the locus of lawyers, what is it that has been our recent or not too recent experience?
Free speech showed lawyers are supposed to be partners in the dispensation of justice system, not the other way around. Not the other way around. Fortunately for us, in that speech, I think what I can catch was that if lawyers continue to abuse the process, will there be justice for all? I tell you, in my few years of practice, definitely there will be. Let me tell you why. Few years of practice, definitely there will be. Let me tell you, few years of practice, definitely there will be. Let me tell you, few years. Our courts, particularly the Supreme Court, our courts does not take whatever a lawyer says, line does not take whatever a lawyer.
All Right, sorry, we're having some audio challenge there. Juma, you're having some reverberations. Our engineers will clear that up. And incidentally, yesterday we were talking about engineers and world engineering there and what they did there to celebrate. And I guess, of course, we were talking about the fact that you have engineers who are in here, and they always are in, so we're going to have to clear up that glitch. And once it is done, we'll return to Senior Advocate Ustaz Usman. But let's come back to our studios. Mazi Afam. Same question I posed to Yunus Ustaz, namely the background report, what it indicated as to perception of the role of lawyers in the value chain of justice delivery in the country.
Well, let me say that lawyers have a very critical role to play in that, because the lawyers, as they are called, are advocates, they are solicitors. So they advocate or solicit on behalf of their clients. But then there are rules of professional conduct and the other applicable rules dictate what a lawyer should do. Now, part of the rules of professional conduct is that a lawyer should not foment strife. So a lawyer should not encourage dispute where none exists in the first place. And a lawyer should also give honest advice to clients, so that if you see that a client's case does not have merit, you should, at the point of being instructed, be able to review that. But sometimes, too, there is a thin line, especially on an issue that is not very clear-cut, whether there are applicable authorities to it, in which case a lawyer will be guided by decided cases as to whether the issue he seeks to converse in court has been decided on, and there will be no need for the lawyer to go. But lawyers like to push the boundary. They like to distinguish, try to show that, yes, there may be a similar case, but as we said, they are not on all fours. So there's something that distinguishes it, and the lawyer tries to rely on that. And all of us have a role to play to ensure that cases that have no business being in courts are not there. And as I insist, a part of the things is that the court should take charge of proceedings before it. In civil trials, in most rules of court now, a lawyer has to give what they call pre-action counseling certificate, where the lawyer agrees to be personally responsible if it is found that a matter a lawyer filed in court is frivolous and ought not to have been filed. Not that it does not have merit, but it's obvious that the lawyer should have known, for example, it shouldn't be in court. Now, the courts have also not deterred lawyers from bringing such cases by failing to impose costs on lawyers who bring such actions to court. Or in cases where you know, for example, that the Supreme Court does not have jurisdiction to entertain an appeal from Court of Appeal, where the Court of Appeal is the final court, and you see lawyers of all categories bring an appeal to the Supreme Court. And maybe in such deserving cases, huge cost, and then this court also exercising its disciplinary powers to punish should be utilized. Otherwise, we'll keep having these issues where people feel that lawyers are the biggest abusers of the court process, that are the biggest contributors to congestion in our courts, and that it's all for monetary purposes. While law is a business, it's also a vocation. It's not all about money. There should be some level of professional ethics and integrity involved in it. You shouldn't, when a client consults your prospective client, see money per se. You should also try to look at the justice of it and whether it is worthwhile taking that matter to court. And you should be bold enough to tell the client, well, I think, while you may feel bad about this, there's nothing we can do because the law does not allow us to do this. And the Bar Association has a great role to play. The disciplinary mechanism of the legal profession also should have a big role to play in this. Let me stop first so that other persons will also air their views about the issue we are discussing.
Exactly. I'll be coming to Frank Tete now. When Yunus Ustaz Usman San was saying, he said lawyers are supposed to be partners in the speedy dispensation of justice. Where is he coming from on that?
I'm happy that we are emphasizing the word justice, because that's the goal. And that is what has been missing. And let us not place too much responsibilities on lawyers, because lawyers don't generate the cases. Lawyers don't generate the facts, the conflicts that demand the courts to adjudicate. Lawyers don't do that. In fact, lawyers play such an important role that the stave off conflicts, that the deterioration of conflicts. And now, the first thing you see, I think Rule 25 of the Rules of Professional Conduct mandates the lawyer to take every case that comes to him. He must give he must go out of his way to give a very strong reason why he must refuse any case. Of course, yes, he doesn't have to engage in filing a matter when he knows that it's against the law. But how would you feel? Because people who approach the lawyers to pay money in order for lawyers to go and defend them believe that have a sense of justice, that the courts must be able to give some kind of legality to that perception of justice that they have. And what could be more disappointing and, discouraging to a potential litigant when a lawyer is saying that you don't, of course, a lawyer must not say things that are outside the law. But the point is this: the reason why you see this recent, hulabaloo misconception about the decisions coming from the court is as a result of the general shortage of justice. And if you see lawyers making efforts to approach the court or reapproach the court, it is because something is missing. Lawyers have been quite helpful. Mazi will realize that, in the FCT, for example, how we have made much progress in terms of having alternative dispute resolution mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that not all matters go to court. But you still need lawyers. And lawyers get paid when they approach the multi-door courthouse, for example, to resolve issues. Because issues, one way or the other, must be resolved. And these issues don't come from lawyers. They come from the members of the public. So I think the lawyers, have been underappreciated in maintaining the peace in the social sphere, as I can say. Because you find that rather than people taking to boxing themselves or taking to self-help, you find lawyers very easy to assess in the FCT and across the entire country. And oftentimes, they are just mere legal letter writing solves the problem that it's given to them. So I think lawyers when lawyers are punished, the way Mazi is emphasizing the fact that when lawyers file frivolous applications, like the one we just experienced, when one very senior and very brilliant lawyer, who the courts even rely on his books when making decisions, decided to punish the lawyer for approaching the court, that amounted to intimidation. They were not intimidating the particular senior advocate. They were intimidating other lawyers, meaning that how could a lawyer of that repute sincerely believed that he had a case and that the Supreme Court was needed to review a matter, and the Supreme Court thought that he was not only wrong but should be punished? I think that was sending a very terrible message to the bar. The bar exists to give voice to the sense of justice and the sense of liberty and freedom that we enjoy in Nigeria. And that should not be intimidating. The court should not give an impression that it's tyrannical and that nobody should approach it even when it makes a mistake. No, lawyers should be able to formulate an impression, formulate a thought, a legal opinion, and then be free to approach the court and let the court indeed reprimand them and not punish them. That will amount to intimidation.
Well, we're going to Kaduna now, where Yunus Ustaz Usman is standing by if he can hear us. You were talking about lawyers being partners in the dispensation of speedy justice to the common man as the last hope of the common man. Can we have your opening comments again?
As I was saying, the fact that you are a lawyer, you are supposed to cement justice to all, not only to your client, and that is where, if a client briefs you, you tell him the position of his case, the weakness or strength of his case. The moment you don't do so, you are not only cheating that man, you are cheating your conscience. Honestly, and the moment you cheat your conscience, you won't go scot-free. But my learned friend says something about intimidation. You see, that if the Supreme Court says, look, we have the power to correct you, that is not intimidation. Let me tell you about the finality of this Supreme Court, something that ordinary people do not know. The moment you start asking the Supreme Court to set aside its judgment because it does not favor you, the effect will be anarchy. Because nobody will be sure that the law is certain. And you know the Nigerian politicians, everybody will be on his own. They have already armed people. Now, if you no longer have confidence in the court, if judgments of the Supreme Court cannot be determined, if it cannot be determined as a final judgment, then it will go to anarchy. Once it comes to anarchy, everybody will be a defender of himself, and there will be war. When there is war, even those politicians who want Supreme Court judgments to be set aside will run away and leave you and I, and leave you and my learned friend who is talking there. That will be neither good for the society nor I. And I continue to warn. The moment we try to rubbish our judicial system, that is the end of this country. Among the three arms of government, I have said it time without number and without any iota of regret that without the Supreme Court, perhaps Nigeria would have been a thing of the past because of the way Nigerian politicians have no apology to anybody, play politics on the negative side of history. And it's most unfortunate.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Yunus Ustaz Usman, for your comments. Let's return to Mazi Afamosigwe. I'm sure that Frank Chete would like to also respond to what the learned senior advocate has indicated. Well, quite clearly, I mean, in the popular imagination, one would say, an issue such as the role of lawyers in the dispensation of justice is significant on account of the so-called political and corruption cases. And when you look at the political cases in recent times, yes, to the layman, the decisions might be somewhat confusing. And they are asking themselves, you know, what is it that this law is all about? What are lawyers doing? It's as if, as the point has been made, that the courts have now turned into the electorate, that the courts now decide who gets elected and who doesn't get elected, even though the judiciary, of course, has its role to play in election matters. So that's the key point. Well, what is this misconception? Is it justified? Or, you know, we're just seeing lawyers who are also overstretching, as the allegation has been made, the boundaries of the legal system with regard to political cases?
What we witness is an end point, not a starting point. Why do I mean it? The electoral process is flawed. The electoral process is organized in such a way that it sometimes favored the strong, those who are able to perpetrate electoral malpractices. And the electoral process is skewed against sometimes skewed against the man who complains that he has lost. The burden on him to establish the electoral malpractices, failure to comply for the election to be conducted in a substantially compliant manner is huge. And so what do you get? Most persons would rather be declared winner and sit back to defend their mandate. It doesn't matter whether the people actually gave them a mandate, but the declared mandate, than be the persons complaining. So what do you have? You now have an extreme judicialization of the electoral process, where the judiciary ultimately must be called in to decide as between the contending parties who ought to be the rightful winner. And now we blame the judiciary for getting involved. But we say nothing, or we don't have harsh words for an electoral process that allows people to manipulate it, that allows candidates to tear results, to foment crisis or violence in areas where they are losing, so that results may be cancelled, who bait the electoral officers to take actions so that they will be subject of judicial challenge. And so you see the courts become a dumping ground for these misdeeds. And then we'll start complaining that the matter stayed too long, that the court has upturned the mandate of the people. But the court deals with evidence. There's a possibility that some of these decisions may not go down well with people, that people would always have reason to complain against them. I think it was the Supreme Court Justice of the United States that said, I think Jackson or someone that said that, look, that even when they have taken their decision and you have a supra court of appeal, it will still set aside some of their decisions, suggesting that no matter how much opportunity you give, there would always be different decisions reached. And these are natural. And forgive me to also digress a bit to note that when Frank suggests that when courts impose costs, it amounts to intimidation of counsel, that may not be right. in deserving cases, and I'm not particularizing here, the court will be right to impose costs. I'll give you an example. If a matter, for example, has been decided by an appeals tribunal or court of appeal, and somebody sneaks up to a federal high court in a faraway state to obtain an order, do you suggest that because you are briefed a lawyer, you can do that? Or that if a court reprimands you for doing what you know you ought not to do when a court has given a final decision, that would amount to intimidating you? Now, the point has to be made that lawyers will never be a tool in the hands of their clients to do what they want. The lawyers, at the end of the day, must bring in their professional training in taking a decision one way or the other, how to assess this. You may not always be right. There are times you may advise your client, a prospective client, he goes to another person and gets the result he wants. It may not also always be suggestive that you were wrong in your advice. But it may also say much about our peculiar judicial process and political process. And at this point, I decided I would say no more. Let others also have their say.
Frank?
I grew up in former Bender states, and the tradition which Edo State still retains is to refer to the high courts as high courts of justice. When you go to other states, many states have been to, that is relegated. So the point for those of us with that kind of tradition is that the courts essentially do justice. And let us not make justice appear so amorphous, so technical that it is only what the courts say. No, the courts, first of all, we should approach the courts and see them as arbiters, the kind of what referees do in games. That is, you know what the decision is, but it is their function. It is their role to express what the decision should be. So justice is predictable. So when you talk about political cases inundating the courts and lawyers not helping to assuage the kind of weight that is being placed on the court, you look at it this way: justice is easy to dispense, and when the decisions come, I'm a bit, why you shy away from being particular, I'm a bit more particular about these political cases and these recent decisions from the Supreme Court, for example. How do you then blame lawyers when obvious matters of fact upon which the law is supposed to be applied are decided in a manner that cannot be justified by any reason? I mean, take the case of, the most important part is we're dealing with a democracy, for example, which deals with numbers. I mean, our constitution expressly states that Nigeria shall be governed according to the principles of democracy. And then you have our courts, for example, deciding to to relegate the majority votes, to disregard them. Now, we're not talking about lawyers here who have a technical knowledge, who are trained to appreciate and respect whatever decisions that come from the court. We're talking about justice in the natural sense and in the public sense. Here we are. Are you talking about Bayelsa or talking about Zamfara, for example? In the case of Bayelsa, if there were individuals that were wrong, the ordinary man in the street believes that why did you then allow the APC to go into the contest and then it won? What's the legal process? You hear Femi Falana, SAN, giving a very erudite view that in the first place, no court should exercise jurisdiction over a matter over a pre-election matter that ought to have been dealt with before the polls began. And so the polls were held, and then the political party polls majority of vote, and then for one reason or the other, you call it law, you call it argument, the courts disregard the popular majority vote. Are you going to refer to Zamfara, for example, where there were internal squabbles between members of the APC in a matter that didn't concern the opposition party? They were allowed to go to the general polls, got majority of votes, and then one reason or the other, for another political party that wasn't interested in the case, wasn't interested in the matter, in the squabble between the APC, were now rewarded with the majority of votes that the APC got, which in fact the APC won nearly all the elective positions. So you see, the people cannot just fathom any basis why courts will reach that kind of decision. That's why you find out that even the lawyer is bewildered that he cannot resist the temptation by the political party or the politician to say, you need to, perhaps the Supreme Court justices or the judges did not see this. Go back to them and That is why would you then blame lawyers? Why would you then punish lawyers? If lawyers carry out any form of malfeasance, refer them to the disciplinary committee. It was your job while you were national secretary of the NBA. So you did it as a court. A court needs to be tempered. A court needs to, at all times, present the impression that it is pursuing justice. I'm not giving the impression to the people that it is just law is so technical. Law is written in plain English.
Well, I was just wondering, Juma, just before you comment, the point that you're making, may I most respectfully indicate that that is respectfully is an echo of the view you get from the street, which is part of the bewilderment that this is what happened in Bayelsa, this is what happened in Zamfara. But persons would also argue that what is the essence of the rule of law? The rule of law doesn't relate to just interactions between you and the government. It also relates to citizen and citizen. And that if you have your internal rules as a political party, for example, you must first respect those rules before you can get into a contest with another person. If you are unable to, as it were, sort yourself out, put your house in order, then your qualification to come into a contest is compromised. And so you couldn't possibly, therefore, have the benefit, even if the entire world voted for you. Your reaction, Frank?
No, let us assume that the position you have canvassed, and which I believe you hold, is correct.
I'm not canvassing it. I'm asking the question from the street.
Let us also assume it is correct. But in that case, when we, the principle, the fundamental law of this country, states that we must practice the principles of democracy, would you then decide to having disregarded the majority votes as a result of the infraction committed internally by some members of a political party, would you then disregard the majority votes that were cast? Why wouldn't, and then, I'm coming, and then give those votes to a party that scored minority popular votes? And in that point, you see, the point becomes there is an alternative. There is a point for justice. Why don't you also allow the majority, the will of the people to prevail by ordering a fresh election? But, the point is this, the sense of injustice, well, you see, the sense of injustice comes from the fact that, why would therefore a party that didn't benefit, why should a party benefit from the wrongdoing, the internal wrongdoing of internal matters of a political party? That's the point. So you now see that the majority, the will of the people hasn't been respected, the will of the people hasn't been truly expressed when you disregard the majority votes and then decide with a judicial fiat by giving victory to a political party that isn't clearly popular. That's the problem.
No, Frank, let me put it this way. In athletics, if an athlete cheats and sets a world record, and it is found out even after he has come first, he or she is disqualified, and the victory is given to the next person. Yes. You talked about Zamfara. In Zamfara, it was Governor Yari's people that went to court to say there was no primaries. It's the other group of people that said there was no primaries. Lists were just drawn up. And the Electoral Act has provisions for the conduct of primaries. So we're talking about party democracy. If the law has talked about how candidates are to emerge, and in flagrant violation of the provisions of the law, you present the list, and it is successfully challenged, the law views whatever votes, no matter how huge, how popular, as wasted votes. In the eyes of the law, it's as if those votes were never cast. And let's particularize this. I do not agree with those that say the court should not get involved once election has taken place. You talked about Bayelsa. You talked about Zamfara. In the two states you've referred to, sir, the courts rendered decisions in trial courts before the elections were held, disqualifying those candidates. Those candidates went to court and secured stay of execution, allowing them to participate. Meaning, you will participate subject to the outcome of the appellate process. And if they are in the two states, the appellate processes upheld their disqualification. So at the time they were running, as at the time they were declared winners, they knew they stood the risk of not ultimately remaining candidates. How do you now say that the Supreme Court, by judicial fiat, I think this is a clear example of applying the law. I think this is a clear example of sending a message to the parties that where certificates are presented, you should do a proper job of evaluating certificates to ensure that persons who are not otherwise disqualified from contesting elections do not pollute the process by being made named in their names being put on a ticket. by putting people who did not emerge through the legally allowed process of selecting candidates from being candidates. So it means you stand the risk of standing or falling with whatever decisions you take. So if your decision is found not to be in sync with the law, you bear the consequences. And I think it would be unfair to the courts to use Zamfara as an example to suggest that the courts usurp the will of the people. And the people are deemed to also suffer the whatever disability affects whichever candidate they've accepted. It takes me back to my earlier postulation that we are heaping all these misdeeds on the courts. If the parties do the right thing and do not, by fiat, sit in an office in Abuja to forward the names of persons who have not scored the highest number of votes to be declared candidates in accordance with Section 87 of the Electoral Act, and allow the primaries to take place, and and send the names of the winners as required by law, these cases would not be there. If the elections are held without people snatching ballot boxes, intimidating voters, writing results, the involvement of the court will be much reduced. Nigeria should have one of the highest cases of electoral cases in the world, and that speaks volumes about how badly we have managed our electoral process. And if the courts have to come in to exercise their judicial powers as is contained in Section 6 of the Constitution to decide disputes between the persons, between individuals, we can end up blaming them for doing that which the Constitution has. Would it be better that these cases are filed and the court said, well, because we don't want to get involved in politics, you guys sort it out yourselves?
Nobody disputes the role of the court and the function of the court. We are disputing the outcome of the court, even though nobody can also usurp their role. The question we have posed before the court is, you keep emphasizing according to law, as if law is an end. The end is not law. Justice is the end. If the legal process and the application of the law by the courts do not in any way reflect a sense of justice, that's where the problem is. In your analogy, using athletics, that at least cannot really fit a proper analogy in this matter. We're talking about votes involving quite a large number of persons. How do you save the votes as a court? A court does not always need to take the way of least resistance. Okay, declare the other person winner without regard to the will of the people. Now, can you say in the application of the law, in declaring the minority, that is the party that that got the minority vote as the winner, can that be a reflection of the principles of democracy also enunciated in the Constitution? Certainly not.
No, I don't agree with you.
No, look, there is no, you see, the point is this: democracy is about numbers. It is not about perception. It's about who wins.
Valid numbers.
Okay, no. How are you going to now disregard the point that there is a way? Justice would have found a way of saving those votes and then punishing those persons who have disregarded the law and not visiting. Of course, I
just want to Frank Tietie. I mean, that's where this is election jurisprudence that we're getting into. I mean, that the points, gentlemen, you have raised are valid, but bear in mind, he says valid votes. Valid votes. You're talking also about the ends of justice. These are things that we'll need to resolve here, but let's bring in again the learned senior advocate, Yunus Ustaz Usman, who is in Kaduna. He's been with us in our studios in the past. He's also been involved in a number of political cases. Learned senior advocate, you've been listening to your two colleagues speak here from Abuja. What are your thoughts on this, particularly with regard to their response to what I have generally labeled the view from the street, to say, look at what happened in Bayelsa, how a governor-elect, was already rehearsing for his swearing in, expecting the guard of honor, even though there were no people in the stadium. He took a salute, and then suddenly before all of that, he said, no, you cannot be sworn in. And then look at Zamfara, the party that didn't get the majority votes, the party took it, and then look at Imo. They said the person that was number 4 on the list suddenly now became number 1. So that is the view on the street. What's your reaction?
Let me say this. Because we are concerned, if Nigerian politicians play politics according to the rules and law and constitution, the courts will never come in. Then there's one thing we are mixing up. This issue of pre-election matter, my learned friend was saying the courts will not do it. Let me explain this. Do you know this pre-election matter? What happens really is that when you fill your form CF001, that is the first step, you take it to INEC. 7 days after that, INEC will publish your particulars in your local government area or where you reside, so that whoever thinks that you are not fit, you ought not to have been there, or you have a disqualification, will now go to court. That is what gives birth to pre-election matters. It is not that the courts will say, bring this matter, we do it, or not at all. Then, in most cases, like my friend has said, he said the will of the people. There can be ignorant will of the people. Will you allow the ignorant will of the people to continue? Let me give you an example. For instance, where somebody was declared insane, and people did not know, they said he contested and voted him. And then you notice that immediately he filled his form CF001 and you went to court, and the court continues. After his election, will you allow a madman to continue to rule because the ordinary people did not know? I want to tell my little friend that is the distinction between these pre-election matters and why it should continue to go along with the election itself. Even section 182, subsection 1J, and 35, 5 and 6 still say, look, when you know of these disqualifications, even if you have been elected, you come down because the people did not know of your legal disabilities before they voted you. You will not vote a madman to rule you. Please let the public get to know that that is the main distinction between pre-election matters and election matters. Then my intimate friend Osigwe has really impressed me. You see, sir, the problem we really have in this country, the Zamfara case. The Zamfara case issue is that the people ought to have conducted primary election in accordance with Section 87. They didn't do so. Somebody who disobeys law, somebody who says I have no regard for the Constitution, and he goes to the field to contest, deceiving people, or you do what you do, say kata 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 kata, vote. Will you still keep that people on seat? Will it not be contrary to your own conscience to do so? That is what the Supreme Court did. The Bayelsa own, I was involved in that. I won't say so, but history is judging whether there was election at all, even in the first place in Bayelsa, or somebody who had 9 different names in 9 different documents. Look, law is not an ass. Law means justice, and justice means somebody whose hands are clean. Please, fortunately for us, Supreme Court has refused to be intimidated by politicians. But I won. I'm an old man. If politicians continue this way, so maybe those of you who are young will see Nigeria. Thank you.
Ustaz Usman, just what you've been talking about all this, and still from the street, like Kingsley said, people are calling the judiciary to sit up and have a serious reform in the judiciary for it to be able to function properly. What's your take on that?
The issue is simply this. People misunderstand judicial system. Judiciary is not technical. Judgment is not technical. Our courts have not applied the technical aspect of justice blindly. People don't understand this because most of us as lawyers don't tell our clients the truth. Like I've always said, the people on the streets will know that, look, your own conscience, my own conscience, even God himself will not allow somebody who has disabilities, a crook, a thief, somebody you cannot trust to be voted in. If by mistake you vote this person in, and the courts come in and say, look, we have evidence at the pre-election matter that this man is this, so please, people should not take to the street and say our vote. You voted for somebody you ought not to have voted. You wanted somebody who will now come and misrule you, to continue to misrule you. So the courts are saving you. But because we don't tell the people the truth. There was a time somebody said, I should go and be a reverend father. I said, this is not a question of reverend father. I'm telling you that this is the truth. Whether reverend father or no reverend father, if I tell you the truth, you take it. If you don't take it, it's not a matter of church here too. But the problem we have with us lawyers, and I mean it, with us lawyers, the lawyers of today, most of us today are not lawyers of yesterday. And it's most unfortunate. Most unfortunate. What we have today is a disgrace. We have today is a disgrace.
All right. Sister Usman, thank you for your comments from Kaduna Network Center. Let's return to our two guests here in the Abuja studios. First, Mazia Famosigwe. You listen to the learned senior advocate and the passion with which he has expressed. Notwithstanding, the view is that every time you keep hearing saying that we are going on appeal, we are going on appeal, we are going on appeal, even when there's, according to the view from the street, potentially no merit in such an appeal. I mean, some persons, they express the view that this tends to increase the cost for litigants and then swells the pocket of the lawyers.
You see, we must be able to tell ourselves the truth that most politicians who go to election petition tribunal, go on appeal, know that they lost the case. They know that the cases do not have prospects in court. But I just thinking among politicians that if, for example, you score 10% of the total number of votes cast in an election and you accept it, it means you have accepted you are not popular. So they go to court, and then the saying will be when they lose, because say, look, they have given bribe. The judiciary would have won, but they give bribe. It's a common thinking. So politicians, and it's also, as one politician told me, it's also a way of keeping your matter alive so that the people will know that you're still interested in the office. And I mean, it's a sad commentary on how we play our politics. In other climes, people make a victory speech and a concession speech on election day night. So when the results are declared and you're winner, you make a victory speech. If you lose, you make a concession speech, except there are compelling reasons why you feel you should withhold your congratulations. We hardly see that happen here. There's also much bitterness. And so it creates a big market. And I use that word advisedly, for lawyers, for who they now call political consultants when cases are pending in court. For all manner of persons benefit from this. So it's an industry. And sometimes there are profit aspects of it. And also some people go to court hoping that the other party will come and settle them so that they will draw their case. So the motive is not always about justice. And end result may not always be interpreted the way it is. And I dare say sometimes voices from the street are not to be ignored. But that is also to be said that justice from the street are always suggestive of a better understanding of the legal position of things. So there are also times that the people in the street may have to be educated as to what has actually happened or what is the effect or meaning of judgment. We may not always get the kind of electoral process and the judicial process that we'll be aspiring to, but we should get it. And we all have a role to play. The politicians, the lawyers, the judges, even the people in the street who keep speaking on different topics.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be coming to Frank Tete now. Ustaz said, you don't tell the people the truth. And I would like to come in here. It's my own assumption that, do they listen? Do they listen to you?
I think we're missing one very important point. If our electoral process is to be flawless, it's not a function of lawyers or even politicians. It's that of an electoral process that is managed by an the election management body. And so if you put a proper electoral process in place, it makes it foolproof, it makes it failure-proof, and then it makes it rigging-proof. We are capable of putting that in place because there is a natural tendency in the political players, including the lawyers, to circumvent the rules. So you need to, first of all, work at putting in place. So a very sound electoral process. In those crimes you refer to, you also don't have to fail to mention the fact that those electoral processes cannot be faulted. That even the person who loses takes delight in acknowledging that a good job has been done by the electoral management body. Now, the important point, and I'll answer your question directly, that all of us seem to be missing is this. We are not saying that the people who did wrong did not do wrong, that those who failed to apply or follow the law did not follow it. The most important thing is the decision you have taken, are they in consonance with the principles of democracy? That is the question we've been posing. In this country, we've seen a man who did not contest the election. His name was not in the ballot paper. He didn't vote. He was not voted for. Yet the courts declared him as governor. Such kind of incongruent decisions have emanated from our courts. You don't. And you accuse. Look, we should not.
For example.
You want us, or for example, Rotimi Amechi of Rivers State. He didn't contest the election. He didn't vote. He was not even in the country as at the time the elections took place. Look, we cannot continue to approach this whole thing.
But explain the basis. I'm sorry to interject.
Yes.
Explain the basis. What was the basis of that decision?
About the primaries.
What was the basis? Was the basis not rooted in the Constitution?
Yes.
That parties
wrongful substitution.
No. And a wrongful substitution against
the
what
point
is
we are
provided for.
trying to make. Let me make this point.
Let
me land. I will land. Yes. Because we seem to be disregarding that foundational position of the law, that we are, as a country, we ought to be governed by the principles of democracy. That third option we are failing to apply is the problem.
Which option?
And the option is, why don't you order fresh elections so that the true will of the people in terms of majority would be expressed? So now, when you disregard when you talk about Mazi,
wait, provides for remedies.
With due respect to the Learned Senior Advocate, when you talk about valid votes, were the votes that were cast in a general election faulted by the election management body? So those were valid votes because you held a poll. No. Now, the point is, save the votes, let the expression of majority have its way. So what stops the courts from saying, rather than disregarding 70% of the votes as wasted votes, which were cast in an election that didn't have any problem, why don't you order fresh elections so that indeed the true will of the people can be expressed? That's the point. We are missing it, so we are allowing a near sense of injustice to prevail. People who didn't contest elections, people who didn't win, are eventually turned to be winners. What then happens to the principle of democracy? What happens to the principle of majority popular votes? We have disregarded it. That's the problem.
Okay, but I'm just wondering, Mazi, just before we bring in again the Learned Senior Advocate, sorry, I keep referring to the view on the street.
Yes. But that is the voice of the people.
We're a public broadcaster.
Yes.
So we want to bring this view so that you can explain to our viewers. Your point about the pursuit of the people's will as part of the goal of judicial review of our elections is noted. But some persons have also said, look, how many times can you order re-election? How many times can you order re-election? So now, on the one hand, maybe a candidate or one of the candidates had, this is correct now, K-leg. You can find that in the Oxford Advanced Mathematics. So we're going to have a new set of elections. And then you have also made an assumption that the electoral management body has the ultimate responsibility of ensuring that the integrity of the electoral process is maintained. But Mazi said here that, look, the shenanigans that lead to the dumping of cases on the judiciary would often arise from what we do. So, first one now, the will of the people. The majority votes came, a person had K-leg, so reorder election. When you reorder election, we now say, no problem. Will of the people will not be exercised, we are going to foment violence. So, how do you address that?
There are a whole lot of issues. Mazi, you testify to the fact that Section 31 places the responsibility of clearing candidates to be fit for election on the political parties. And you see, now, but if you read Section 31 in total, you find that it places punishment on any person that presents itself or presents false certificates or and does any form of infraction. So you see, you don't punish the people. You don't disrupt the system. You apply punishment to the appropriate person who actually committed the infraction. You see, watch my argument here. My argument is that whatever happens, the principles of democracy must prevail. That is, you cannot disregard popular votes. If you give them, and then we've done well in the Foreign Republic. When you see, rather, and I address your question when you say, do we now keep on having elections as a result?
Reordering the elections.
Reordering the elections. The truth about it is this. That is the reason why, with much respect to the senior advocate, Femi Falana's view with regards to pre-election matters being decided first before the elections. And you see, it creates more confusion where you allow elections to go on when matters that deal with the candidacy, the appropriate, have not been resolved. So why now? Is it not foolhardiness for you to now say, okay, let us go and just test it. Let's go to just hold the election pending whatever happens at the lower court. What is that? So all matters before the elections must be resolved so that when you hold the election...
Within which time frame? Because if you recall, we've had constitutional amendments in this country to say, look, election cases must be decided within a certain time frame. Because we had instances in the past when somebody got elected, the person was enjoying the benefits of an office to which he was not deemed to have been duly elected, and then a decision comes on subsequently. But now, for pre-election matters, are you suggesting that there should also be a delimitation of the time? So,
Frank, let's be honest. Section 285 gives for the trial court 60 days, 6 months, for the appellate process 60 days, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court 60 days. And then the same constitution makes provision that the election shall be held not earlier than 120 and not later than. If you calculate the timeline to challenge the electoral process, it's longer than the timeline for holding of the election. But what is important under this section 34 is that when you're challenging documents presented by a document, judgment must be given before the conduct of the election, because the Electoral Act says that the court shall order that the person shall be disqualified from contesting in the election. And in the 2 states you referred to, judgments were given. It is the losing candidates utilizing the appellate process that kept the matter alive. If INEC were to say, okay, let us await the outcome of this appellate process, they may likely end up breaching the provisions of the Constitution that has given a timeline for the conduct of the election. So the tenure of the occupant of that office will lapse without an election having been conducted. So we go back to looking at the timelines contained in the Constitution.
And was it also not the case, Frank? Sorry, let us senior advocate, we must apologize to you. We're not keeping you in abeyance just to resolve some of the issues that are coming up here. Now, was it also not the case, Frank, that in the past, again under the rubric of our democracy, that the responsibility for vetting candidates now lies on the political parties? In this same country, where you can quarrel and say, oh, this was while we were experimenting with transition rigmarole under the military, candidates were being disqualified on air.
Yes.
In this country. And then at some point, INEC could also disqualify candidates. So INEC doesn't disqualify.
Political parties dissolved.
INEC doesn't disqualify anybody now. So sort yourself out and then come and meet us.
Yes.
I don't know, Frank. That's one leg. Just by the way, Afam Osigwe raised something about an athlete being disqualified in the race. And you didn't find that quite opposite. I'm sure that Nigerians will quarrel with you, because at the Sydney Olympics in year 2000, Nigeria came second in the 4x400. And one of the quarter milers then was the late Sunday Bada, a police officer. Nigeria came second and earned the silver. Brilliant race that we ran in that thing. The Americans came first. It turned out that one of the American athletes, years later, failed a dope test, and Nigeria was then given the gold medal.
Years later.
Yes, you get to respond to that, but right now we need to take a break. We'll be right back, and the discussion is getting heated. Don't go away.
My name is Balaunti. I'm the Managing Director of Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum products across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to pond, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this Operation White will have a reduction of close to 6 million liters on daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over ₦1 billion every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
To dey disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Thanks for joining us. And people from the street are also adding their voice to the conversation in the tweets that came in. Now, we begin with Mike Anyako. Nigerian lawyers and dispensation of justice in Nigeria leave much to be desired. Many of them don't advise their clients well, all in the name of making money. Too bad. The recent flooding of Supreme Court for reviews are empirical evidence, as well as many other cases, especially on electoral matters.
Festus Akimboyewa says courts are supposed to be places for the dispensation of justice and not for commerce. Sadly, some of our lawyers connive with politicians to turn our courts to places of commerce. Lawyers and judges who behave in this manner should be disrobed.
And Omobwela Babs tweets, Nigerian lawyers are mostly after what comes to them in terms of material benefits. They are in recent times proving the cliche that lawyers... Well, I won't mention that. These days, many of them have lost any sense of decency. They only care about their stomach.
Akeju Olagbajo tweets, the profession without any doubt is noble, but the confusion in the dispensation of justice is from our own interpretation of the burden of proof. This is what many lawyers exploit to free suspects.
And Titus Mondenok, if lawyers are to be true, then lawyers won't be liars. I expect that the judiciary stays above board because it checkmates the absurdity of the legislators and the executive in government. When this critical government body diminishes, then you know that there is no government in place.
Okay, Chris Simeon tweet says Nigeria's judiciary needs serious reformation. The way and manner lawyers and judges handle cases these days is worrisome. Now, in a suit, a lawyer knows that his client will not scale through at the end, but keeps on collecting money from the client at every sitting. This is unfair.
And Daily Jack Solomon tweets, one of the reasons why some Nigerian lawyers abuse the legal process by filing this frivolous lawsuit is because of the inadequate information available to the general public on how to file grievances against erring lawyers and the compromising attitude of some of our judges and practitioners.
Utulo Sunday. Now, perception of most Nigerians now is that justice is for the rich or people with political power. So is there any way this notion can be corrected by our lawyers?
And Bashiru tweets, there is a stronger perception that defense lawyers often frustrate efforts aimed at dispensation of justice by exploiting all kinds of legal avenues. But the prosecution side also has its faults, as they often fail to make efforts towards ensuring their cases are watertight.
Anosike Kingsley tweets, said the studio is looking like a courtroom today. Intelligent arguments from your guests.
Yes, quite commendable indeed. Ayola Tauhid Adeni, some Nigerian lawyers are only after what will enter their pocket than winning the case for their clients. The Nigerian judiciary needs to be truly independent so that biased justice should be dispensed with.
Abdul Hamid Ado, I'm optimistic that our judicial system is improving. It can be described as an independent and impartial arm of government. This is my opinion.
Louis Chevrier tweets, the truth about some lawyers we have today is that they are not after justice. They are interested in making money, lots of money, as long as you've got the cash to pay. They will back you up wherever you go, even though you get caught committing a crime.
Cletus Ugele, I think we should look at the Constitution because some lawyers take advantage of the loopholes in it to deny justice.
And Bola Nuga tweets, most times lawyers ask for unnecessary adjournments in courts and abuse the system by coming up with frivolous injunctions or stay of execution that delay speedy implementation and administration of justice in the country. The court can do well by squashing all these frivolities.
Yerima Hamza, so the issue of justice is the collective responsibility of the citizens. All hands must be on deck. That is, individuals and security must be given maximum must give maximum support to the judicial system.
Usman Banu Kantu tweets, the dispensation of justice in Nigeria is always at the crossroad. Cases before the court are disposed of based on technicalities rather than glaring evidences, unless and until certain issues in the Constitution are strengthened before the will of the people prevails.
Osita Chibuike, Mr. Frank, that's Frank Tete, our guest here, I should know that you can't build a mansion on the wrong foundation because it will not stand. Politicians must be made to obey the laws of their parties and nothing less. If not, selfish politicians will hijack our developing democracy.
And Cecilia Okoroma tweets, for whatever it's worth, let each and every one of us endeavor to respect laws of our constituted institutions, live self and do what is right for the sake of our dear country. Mr. Frank.
Okay. All right. Well, Frank, as I said, we've kept the senior advocate for a while, so let's return to him in Kaduna. Yunus Ustaz Usman SAN. Part of what emerges from all of this, again, from the view on the street, and the words that you also expressed with regard to the role of some lawyers in the dispensation of justice, more particularly now political and corruption cases. The question arises as to what role, if any, the Bar Association and its disciplinary committee can play in all of this. I mean, that's frivolous applications and needless exploration of the appellate process and all of that. Is the NBA a bit too remote, in seeking to rein in its members?
Very much. The NBA has been doing its best, and particularly without praise singing. The present chairman of the disciplinary committee, who is not my friend, he's doing a very good job. He doesn't do the type of rush job we were doing before, penalizing enemies and doing this. And NBA is not keeping folding its arms at all. But the issue is my advice is simply this. Lawyers, we should tell ourselves, whatever you are doing, if it is wrong, you can never go scot-free. It's not possible. Whether you are caught or not is a different thing. You can never. Let me tell you, you can never go scot-free because you are made by God, brought onto this earth for a purpose. And the moment you try to derail that noble purpose for which God has brought you, you are creating causes not on yourself, your first, second, third, up to fourth generations. See Genesis 20, verse 5, where God says, a single sin, intentional sin you have committed, God says he will punish you up to your third and fourth generation. Do you know? And my advice to the politicians, they don't know. They are very good ones who are my friends. They don't know that why most of their children are not doing well or are drunkards or this is that they use this corrupt money, stolen money to train their children. And so God makes sure that these children do not grow well in their presence. But we don't learn at all. I'm not preaching, but I'm telling you that is the fact.
you so
Juba,
yes. Thank you, Ustaz. We'll be coming back to Frank Tete now. You know, one of the tweets that came in said that there is not much information or education available to the general public on how to file grievances against erring lawyers.
No, but I think that's not true. The NBA takes responsibility for receiving complaints against lawyers, misconduct by lawyers. And the NBA has done very well. The thing about it is that part of the rules of filing a complaint is that you don't have to make it available to the media until after the disciplinary committee, the LPDC, that is the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee, has fully dispensed with the case. So there are several cases, several complaints that have been made against lawyers that are actually, even senior advocates. The Supreme Court, where where the proceedings take place. Several, when you go to the Supreme Court in a typical legal practitioners privileges committee, disciplinary committee, for example, you see a number of senior advocates that are on trial. So a number of lawyers are also on trial. Several complaints have been filed. I can assure the members of the public. All you need to do, address a complaint either to the secretary or to the president of the Bar Association. But you see, it's something very important when we talk about frivolous cases and all of that. You see, one revolutionary thing that has happened to the Nigerian legal system is the enactment of the 2009 Fundamental Enforcement Procedural Rules. I practice in the realm of human rights. I don't do every other kind of law. I restrict my legal practice to human rights. And you find that the rules in its preamble state that these rules are calculated to expand the realm of human rights litigation and not to restrict them. And those rules effectively demolished the issue of local standard, which is something Nigerian courts are very eager to guard. Nigerian courts are very eager to throw away cases and consider them frivolous because the people who are filing them don't even have interest in those cases, they can't even establish courses of action. Whereas we have rules of court, fundamental rights enforcement rules enacted by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, encouraging public interest litigation, for example, in order to hold government more accountable, in order for government to deliver more of the benefits of democracy to the people. So it's difficult to balance these things. How then do you now, a lawyer who challenges the infractions of the executive with regards to the implementation of a particular law establishing a commission, for example, is considered to have filed a frivolous matter because he doesn't have the local standard. Many of the cases Ganifa Emi filed, for example, in trying to establish issues of justice, were all thrown out of the court because he was considered not to have established sufficient interest. So it poses some measure of difficulty for lawyers in that regard. Are we now going to, for fear, and that's why I made use of the word intimidation. Lawyers are now very afraid with what transpired recently in the Supreme Court in the case of Bayelsa, when a legal icon of that kind of repute and standard was punished for thinking up a certain kind of legal opinion. Then lawyers are now afraid. So whether you like it or not, we must stay away from this elitist approach to the law. The law does not create a barrier. And I still maintain respectfully that, you can't compare an electoral process involving hundreds or thousands of people with the few runners on the track. They're not that incomparable.
We have to go to Kaduna now, where Ustaz Usman will give us his closing comments.
My closing comments are this. Lawyers should always know that if they don't advise their clients well and anything goes wrong, they have offended God, they have offended their conscience, they have offended the reason for which God created them to be lawyers. Lawyers are not supposed to be liars. Lawyers are supposed to be people who will ensure that there is peace, there is justice, there is fairness, whether to your client or to somebody else. The moment you don't do that, you have cheated your own conscience. Thank you very much.
All right, that's learned senior advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman, a minister in the Temple of Justice and also a minister in the Temple of God. God bless you.
Amen.
All right, so let's come to our Abuja studios here and get the closing thoughts also of Mazia Famosigwe.
Well, I maintain that if all the key actors, the electoral umpire INEC, the lawyers, the courts, the politicians, the political parties especially do the right thing, that these complaints about the involvement of the court in the electoral process will be greatly reduced, and then people would also be able to know who the candidates are, and then their choices would be respected.
All right, so on that note, we'd like to thank you, Mazia Famosigwe, former General Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association. Thanks a lot for a very exciting conversation today. Frank Chetie, human rights lawyer, we'd like to thank you for being with us and for the propositions that you all have made to this topic. So that does it for our conversation.